Well, good evening to each of you and welcome to the class. We are so happy to be here with you, and we're really looking forward to sharing on this topic of how to go off the grid for pennies on the dollar, because this is something that's very near and dear to our hearts, something that we have had to do personally, and it's really what kind of got us going in the direction that we are now with education about off-grid power systems.
Yeah, so thank you very much for coming out tonight, and we are really excited to share with you several things, strategies that we learned that made the off-grid transition much more feasible. That's right. What are some of those strategies?
Well, one of the things that we're going to be looking at is the most effective strategy for cutting the cost of your off-grid system without cutting the quality. That's kind of a hobby horse of mine, you might say. I don't want to compromise on the quality, but yet many of us do need to cut the cost down. So I'm going to show you the most effective way to dramatically impact the cost of your system without affecting quality. We'll be looking at some sample systems to give you an idea of what it looks like, what a feasible off-grid system looks like from a lifestyle perspective, as far as like what appliances you can use and things like this. We'll be looking at a step-by-step approach if you're tight on funds and you don't have the money to be able to purchase a full-fledged off-grid power system, how to break it up into steps so you can do it a little bit at a time and be progressing gradually towards energy independence. And then we'll also be looking at the 5 options for designing your off-grid power system. And that's one of the most important things that you can do. It's something that you can be doing right now wherever you are, is working on that system design. So we'll be talking to you about that.
And don't worry, dramatically changing your lifestyle, like he said, is something that we don't advocate, because if that's something that you have to do, then you're probably not going to go off the grid.
Or at least not stay off the grid.
Yeah, that's right. So we want to show you how you can maintain your current lifestyle habits, even the ones right now, while transitioning step by step to an off-grid power system. And it can be done. And not only can it be done, but it can be done on a shoestring budget. And if we did it, which we did, then we know that you can do it too.
That's right. So this class is roughly around an hour long, and then after that we'll have a resources section, and we'll try to get to any questions that we haven't answered in the chat box. We'll try and take care of those in the chat box, so feel free to fire away with any questions that you might have. Don't worry if you don't see other people's comments or questions with our system the way it's set up. It doesn't show that, but we are able to see all of your questions, and we will do our best to try and reply. We have little ones in the house, so you may hear them in the background, and so forgive us for that, but you know how that is when you got little ones. And so Lisa may have to slip away every now and then, but or maybe partway through the class you may have to disappear, but anyhow, we'll do the best we can. And let's go ahead and jump in.
Yeah, let's jump in.
Okay, very good. I am so excited to share with you these strategies that work for us, that have worked and that continue to work, and that I see working for so many other people. First of all, who am I, and why should you listen to what I have to say and what Lisa has to say? Well, we have been living off the grid for many years. I actually started this journey back in the 90s, and we have had to basically learn in the school of hard knocks about how to go off the grid with a very limited budget, because that is the position that we found ourselves in.
That's right. And without dramatically changing our lifestyle, because so many people think that if you're going to go off the grid, you better pull out those kerosene lamps and the crank blender, because otherwise you're not going to be off the grid. And that's just not the case. We live off the grid, and we live very comfortably. So it's very feasible, and it's feasible to do it on a budget. We're a small family, and we're self-employed. So we definitely are not fabulously wealthy, and we did it. And so if we can do it, we know you can do it for sure.
And the whole kerosene lamps and outhouses thing is one side of the of the comments that we hear, and then the other side is the people who think it's going to cost just ridiculous amounts of money.
Yes.
I mean, like tens and tens and tens of thousands of dollars. And it's like we've been spending years trying to get through to people. It's neither of those.
That's right.
I mean, it can be, yes, if you are not careful, and if you do some of the things that we're talking about not doing in this class, then yes, it could be very expensive. And there are certainly people who live like Little House on the Prairie, but it doesn't have to be that way. We live very normally, and if you came and visited us today, most likely you would not even know that we lived off the grid unless you happened to see our solar panels. And we didn't pay an arm and a leg for our system either. So we're going to show you how we did that. And, necessity is the mother of all invention, and since the power lines were inaccessible from our location, we had to figure out how to set up an off-grid power system. And, like we already mentioned, we had a less than bare bones budget to do this with. And so over the next several years, we experimented and we learned in the School of Hard Knocks until we eventually ended up with a good power system. And after going through all of that, we decided to invest a ton of time and research and experimentation into this so that we could develop the easiest possible ways for an average person to go off the grid and to do it right the first time with a limited budget and without being an electrical engineer.
And believe me, I'm no electrical engineer.
And so anyhow, what this culminated in was our in-depth training course called Off-Grid Bootcamp that currently has hundreds of students enrolled, and they're learning how to go off the power grid with a reasonable budget and without dramatically changing their lifestyle. And I keep hammering away at that, but I want you to understand this is reality. I don't care how many people tell you that you can't live normally off the grid. You can. We are doing it, and we know many other people that are doing it, and none of us have put a ton of money into our power systems. So over the past 10 years or so, I've taught literally thousands of folks across the nation about off-grid power systems, in seminars and in-person seminars, and also on webinars such as what you're tuned into right now. And today I'm pulling from our years of experience and research, as well as from the experience of others, to share with you the most effective tips for going off the grid when your budget is very limited. And friends, like I said, we are speaking from experience. This is not some thing that we've dreamed up. This is not something that we are planning to do someday. Sometimes you see all sorts of things on YouTube from people that they really don't know what they're talking about. And what I'm trying to tell you is that we're doing this. So please listen to what we're trying to share with you today, because we're sharing with you what works. This is how we and many others are doing this.
Yes, that's right. So we're going to need your help if you want to get the full benefit of this class. Here's what we need from you. We need your full attention. I know there's so much to do and so much that's going on around you, but if you really want to tap into our experience and learn how you can cut your costs exponentially when going off the grid, then I need you to do me a favor. Turn off that Skype and close your Facebook window, put your cell phone where it won't distract you, and just dedicate the next hour to your future. We've invested a lot of time in putting this together for you, and we're sharing it with you absolutely free at no cost to you. So all we're asking from you is that you just give us your full attention for just the next hour. Sound good?
Sounds good. Let's get rolling here. So, how to go off the grid for pennies on the dollar. In 1896, an Italian economist named Vilfredo Pareto observed a very interesting phenomenon. He found that 80% of the land was owned by roughly 20% of the people. And it got him to thinking, wondering if maybe there was some kind of an interesting ratio that would play out in other aspects of life. Later on, out in the field, he found that roughly 80% of the peas were found in 20% of the pea pods. That may seem a little interesting, an observation like that, but he started checking this ratio out in all sorts of other aspects of life, even right down to human behavior and things like this. And he developed what we now call the Pareto principle, or the 80-20 rule. And it states that in certain situations, 80% of the results come from 20% of the causes. So I think that you're going to find the 80-20 rule to be very applicable when we're talking about cutting the cost of our off-grid power system. There's a few simple strategies that create the vast majority of the savings that you're going to find when setting up an off-grid power system. So while there are a ton of possible options that you could use to cut the cost of your system, I'm going to focus on the 20% of those options that will bring you 80% of savings. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay.
Got it.
So we're trying to whittle this down to the biggest bang for your buck. These are just the handful of things that are going to make the biggest difference. And secret number one is where you are hands down going to make absolutely the biggest difference. Secret number one states that the most effective strategy for cutting your off-grid system costs without cutting quality is to become more energy efficient. Cutting your power usage does not, and I repeat, does not need to dramatically change your lifestyle, but it can drastically cut your system costs. And I'm talking to the tune of tens of thousands of dollars. And this is something that we see played out so many times with so many different systems. This is the best way. If you're looking for one way to dramatically change the cost of your system, this is the way to do it. But you might be thinking, well, is this once again the kerosene lamps kind of thing and living like Little House on the Prairie? Absolutely not. In fact, this picture to me illustrates what we're talking about very nicely. It's not about doing without light. It's not about doing without electricity. It's about being more efficient and choosing our appliances wisely. You've still got a light bulb. It's just a different kind of light bulb that uses a fraction of the power. Now, I'm not a huge fan of compact fluorescent lights. I actually like LED lights better. But the point holds true. It's a light. A light is a light. You've still got light. It's just using far less power. And that's what we're talking about. So your one take-home concept from this whole class, if you get nothing else from it, is the P times H equals C formula, because this is really the concept that I find that a lot of people don't understand. They're, thinking about when they're looking at energy efficiency, they're looking at, how much power does this appliance use? And really, I'm not so interested in how much power it's using right now. What I'm looking at is the cumulative energy that appliance uses. So here's what P times H equals C stands for. Power times hours of operation equals cumulative energy. So what we're talking about here is the power would be how much power it's using right at this moment in time. Hours, of course, would be how many hours that appliance is on for a given period of time. And then those two numbers multiplied are going to give you the cumulative amount of energy that appliance uses, and that is what we're after. So here's an example. Let's take an appliance that uses 70 watts when it's running. If that appliance is on for 5 hours a day, then we take 70 watts times 5 hours. 70 times 5 equals 350 watt hours per day. Or you might be more used to the unit of measurement kilowatt hours, because that's what your power bill states. It tells you how many kilowatt hours you used each month. And so 350 watt hours would be 0.35 kilowatt hours, because 1 kilowatt hour equals 1,000 watt hours. And so that's what this simple formula states. Now, the reason why this is such a big deal is because so many people, you would be surprised how many people don't understand this simple concept of how you arrive at the cumulative energy of an appliance. Let's just take an example here. You might have an appliance that uses very little power, but if it's running for many hours a day, or maybe 24 hours a day, that appliance could be a big deal, and you need to focus a lot of energy on getting a more efficient model of that appliance. But you could have another appliance that uses maybe a ton of power when it's running, but it's only running for a few minutes a day. And in that case, it may not add up to a whole lot of cumulative power. And so this formula is really key for helping us to determine which are the appliances that we really need to become more efficient with. And so this is an important concept that we'll be coming back to this. So just tuck this one away. P times H equals C. So let's take a look at step number one, which is the P of this formula. How do you find out how much power the appliance is using? The kilowatt meter is my favorite tool for doing this. It's so easy. I mean, you've used the kilowatt meter.
That's right.
Haven't
It's
you?
very easy to use.
Right.
Even I can use it.
And you just plug the appliance into the kilowatt meter, plug the kilowatt meter into the outlet on the wall, and it tells you how much power the appliance is using right then. That's it. Job done. You might be wondering, though, what do you do if you have an appliance that that can't plug into a kilowatt meter? Well, it's actually quite simple, because almost any appliance, let's just say a water pump that is hardwired into your system, almost any appliance like that, it's going to have a tag on it that looks something like this, and that tag is going to tell you a bunch of things. The two key points that you're looking for are the volts and the amps. And that may be Greek to you, don't worry. All I want you to do is take the volts, multiply it times the amps, and that's going to tell you roughly how many watts that appliance uses when it's running. Very simple. So that's how you arrive at the P for power. Amps times volts equals watts. So then step 2 is to figure out how many hours the appliance is going to be running for. And really, this is where you're going to need to do some self-assessment. You need to sit down with your family and decide how long and how frequently you'll be using each appliance. Now, this doesn't have to be precisely accurate, just needs to be an educated guess to give you a rough idea. You know, after all, things are going to vary from day to day. They certainly do in our home, and most likely they will in yours too, but we just need a reasonable estimate to use in the planning stages. And then step 3 is the cumulative power, and this is what we're after. And for appliances that turn on and off, like a refrigerator or a freezer where they're running part of the time and then they're off part of the time, an appliance like that, there's a really easy way to arrive at how much cumulative power that appliance uses, and that is to just plug the thing into a kilowatt meter, leave it plugged in for 24 hours, and then come back and look at the kilowatt meter, and it will tell you how much cumulative energy, how many kilowatt hours that appliance used in that 24-hour period. Easy peasy. That's how simple it was. And if you have a load-based appliance, like maybe a washing machine or a dryer, you know, just plugging it into a kilowatt meter and seeing how much power it's using right at that moment isn't going to tell you anything, because it's using various amounts of power depending upon the cycle that it's on. And so in that case, you're going to plug the washing machine into the kilowatt meter and run an entire wash cycle with clothes, and then look at the kilowatt meter after you've run that load, and it will tell you how many kilowatt hours that washing machine consumed to run one load of wash. And there you go. Now you know how many kilowatt hours it used. So for those types of appliances, just use the kilowatt meter, and that takes care of it. But for most of your typical appliances, you're going to want to use some sort of a spreadsheet calculator that can make this task much easier and much more accurate than trying to crunch all the numbers and run all of the math, because it takes into account appliances that maybe you don't use every day. For instance, let's just say a vacuum cleaner that you only use once a week. Well, we're trying to determine what our average daily power usage is, but if we only use the vacuum cleaner once a week, then how does that work? We need something that's going to factor that power usage out over each day, and that's what a spreadsheet calculator can do. And to make this super easy for you, I'm actually going to give you the little calculator that I put together for calculating your daily power usage, and I'll try and email it to you in the next 2 or 3 days. But this calculator is one of numerous calculators that I developed for my off-grid bootcamp students. And I've had people who tried to do the numbers without this tool, and they tell me that they would have paid quite a bit of money to buy a tool like this, because it just makes it so much easier. And just as a thank you for attending the class, I'm going to give it to you, and I'll just email it to you. And please remind me if I forget, but I'll try and remember to do that. So what kind of a lifestyle could you reasonably expect to live off the grid? Well, let's take a look at some options. So I'm going to flip over here to my spreadsheets, and let's just take a look at some numbers here. So this would be, well, I'll just show you what our numbers look like, what our appliance usage looks like. So this is, once again, it's a rough idea. It's not exact. It may not have everything, but it has the general idea of what we're doing. So we've got a blender running, 5 or 10 minutes, 4 days a week, internet modem, cell phone charger, laptop, iPad charger, hair dryer, water pump, a bunch of lights throughout the house, invisible fence for the dog, hard drives for our business. We've got a bunch of, professional grade hard drives, and the desktop computer, iMac computer. We've got a washing machine. Personally, we don't have a dryer at this point in time, not because of a power usage issue, but just because we live in a small home, and with the kids and everything, we're kind of busting at the seams, and so we're trying to save some space. But probably in the next year or two, we'll put a dryer in, and it'll use a little bit of power, but not much. And then we have a refrigerator. You could certainly use a upright combination refrigerator freezer. It would use more power than these two combined. We were trying to save some power usage and without spending a ton of money, and so we've found that a chest freezer converted into a refrigerator is a great way to use that. Uses very little power and does a nice job. No, it's not as convenient as an upright, and so if you're willing to use a little more power and build a larger system, then you could certainly do that. But this is just our numbers right now. We've got a chest freezer, and I'm using the winter power usage because the winter time is the most difficult time from a solar power standpoint. And so you really want to base your numbers around winter power usage. And so in the wintertime, we have our chest freezer out in the unheated shop, and it uses far less power than it does in the summertime, as you can see. And so our power usage, 2400, you factor in inefficiency for the inverter, and 2700 watt hours a day. That would be like 2.6, 2.7 kilowatt hours a day, somewhere around there. And does that seem like something that's feasible, workable for you? All of these appliances, it looks like a pretty normal household, don't you think? And really it is. It is a very normal household, and that I don't think that you would notice any difference if you were visiting us. And so what kind of size of solar array does it take for this kind of a setup in the inland Northwest, in northern Idaho, where this is like almost a worst case scenario for solar usage? So you can see in the wintertime, with average weather and things like that, you're looking somewhere in the neighborhood of 3,000 watts of solar for that size of a system. And with the cost of solar the way it is, even with tariffs and that sort of thing, it still is quite reasonably priced these days, far less than it used to be. And so that, a 3,000 watt array is not anything that's out of sight for solar these days. And that's if you put in a solar array that would take care of all of your needs even in the wintertime. What many people will do is they'll kind of split the difference, and they'll put in a solar array that will take care of summer, fall, and spring, and maybe part of their winter needs, and then they'll just figure on having to run the generator periodically during the winter time, during those 3 winter months or so. And in a climate like ours where it's very difficult for solar in the winter, then that's not a bad idea. But for many of the more moderate climates, which is almost anywhere else in the country other than the Northwest, you could really, it's a lot more feasible to go ahead and build your solar system for the winter. So then that gives you kind of what I consider to be an average size system, a medium size system. We could go on the smaller side, and so we could say a small system in best case conditions, which would be like the Southwest, where you've got lots of sunshine and that sort of thing. So this would be a small, very more limited system where you don't have a lot of appliances. You've got blender, internet modem, cell phone charger, laptop computer, hair dryer, water pump, living room lights, bedroom light, and washing machine, and just a fridge. No chest freezer or no freezer. And this would be using numbers for our converted chest freezer that's been converted into a fridge. And so as you can see, it is a little more limited than the mid-sized example, but still you've got a decent amount of stuff going on here, and you're talking only, 1.1, 1.2 kilowatt hours a day, something like that. And as far as the amount of solar, now once again, these are just averages. Everything's going to be different for you depending upon your location, power usage, your shade, and all of these kind of things. But you can see a very small solar array could handle this kind of a setup in the desert Southwest. And if you were to take these same appliances, we're talking 600, a little over 600 watts of solar needed for wintertime. If we were to take this same appliance usage that we were just discussing and apply that to a worst case climate, like what we face here in the Northwest, then you would be looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,400 watts of solar to get you through the wintertime, and really 700 watts would do just fine for 9 months out of the year. And so you can see that's a pretty small system by today's standards, and quite feasible with that amount of usage. Now, if you felt that this was too limiting of as far as appliances, and if you felt that our system was too limiting, then we could look at what I consider to be more of a large system. And so a large system would look something like this, larger system. And I've seen systems, I've certainly heard of systems that are larger than this, but this is what I would consider to be kind of large. The blender, juicer, toaster, kitchen lights, dining room lights, living room lights, lots and lots of lights throughout the house, invisible pet fence, internet router, internet modem, cordless phone, TV, DVD player, Bose stereo, cell phone charger, laptop, iPad charger, hairdryer, water pump, garage door opener, wood stove fan, washing machine, propane clothes dryer, and then a conventional upright fridge freezer combo unit, and also in addition to that a chest freezer that's outside unheated in the winter. And with all of that, still a fairly reasonable power usage, maybe 3.5 kilowatt hours per day, 3.5 to 4 kilowatt hours a day, somewhere in that range. And so with that, in the desert Southwest kind of a location, you're looking at 2,000 watts of solar is all, with a large system to get you through even the winter with very minimal, if any, generator usage. And so then if you were to take that appliance, I mean, that's quite reasonable for that type of a system. And that's quite a few appliances. I mean, you may have some different ones, but you may not use all of those. We certainly don't use all of these that are on this list here. But if we were to take those numbers and apply it to a worst case scenario like we face here in the Northwest, then you'd be looking at certainly more from a solar standpoint. Still, 2,000 watts of solar would carry you through probably 9 months out of the year. And during the remaining 3 months of the winter, you would need to run the generator some. But based upon experience, I can tell you that you wouldn't be running the generator a whole lot. It would certainly be, my guess would be less than 100 hours a year that you would put on that generator. And, if you were able to go up to 3,000 or 3,500 or even 4,000 watts of solar, then you'd be even better off. And this is a worst case scenario. Most people are going to find themselves somewhere in between those two extremes. Most of you are in a more moderate climate. And so, like, a good part of the East Coast is going to be more of a moderate climate, the Midwest also. And so you're probably going to find yourself somewhere between those two extremes that we've been looking at, the Southwest and the Northwest. But that gives you an idea. And, does that seem like a hardship to live with the appliances that we were just looking at there? If that seemed feasible to you, then I think that you are a very good potential candidate for going off the grid. So secret number 2, the easiest way to buy a big ticket item when you're short on cash is to make payments. I don't know about you, but I don't really like payments because of the debt that's involved, going into debt when you're making payments. And so you can do this, you can gain the advantages of buying something on payments and avoid the debt that payments bring by breaking your complete solar system into smaller purchases. In other words, by setting it up one stage at a time and just biting it off. You might think of this as baby steps. And so secret number 2 is the step-by-step method. Now, if you're currently on the grid and you'd like to transition off the grid, then option number 1 is probably the best choice for you. And we're going to be looking at some things that you can do to gradually transition yourself from on the grid to off the grid. Now, if your location is far from the power lines, or if you just want to become disentangled from the power company completely and you want to become energy independent now, then option number 2 is for you. And that's actually what we did. It does require less red tape since you're not having to interact with the power company. And in the end, it's probably going to work out to be less expensive than option number 1. But it does involve a little bit more commitment because you're doing this cold turkey. There's no return. So I think for a lot of people, option number 1 is a good choice, and that is to transition off the grid gradually. So let's take a look at this, how this works. So right now, with your current system, with your current way that your home is set up, you've got the power lines from the power company running into your main panel of your house, your main electrical panel, and that's running into your house. And the panel splits it up into different circuits and everything. So step number 1 of this step-by-step transition is to install a generator. You're going to have an electrician install a transfer switch in between the power lines and your main breaker box. It's going to have to be an electrician that does this, a licensed electrician. And once they install that, that gives you somewhere to hook your generator up to so that it can power your house during a blackout. And that transfer switch is an important piece of equipment because it makes it impossible to be hooked up to the power company and your generator at the same time. You do not want to do that. You never want to be hooked up to both at the same time. Some serious safety issues if you do that. So the transfer switch keeps everything safe and makes sure that you can only be hooked up to one or the other at the same time. And then from there, the power just runs into your house as normal. And so when the grid is on, it's running in. When the grid goes down, you can fire your generator up, and now your house is powered with the generator. Now that's all well and good, and it's a great first step, but the problem is that it's not very independent. You only have power when the generator is running. And so, you can also run into issues where fuel goes bad and things like this happen. And so this is only a short-term thing to get you through a short blackout. Once you run out of gas, that's it. No more power. So this is not an independent solution. This is just a Band-Aid, a temporary Band-Aid. So step number 2 is that we're going to add some additional components here and take us to the next level where we have a greater degree of independence. So here's what we've done with this setup. We've added something called a sub panel, powering the key circuits in our house, the key appliances in our house that we need to be operational during a blackout. And then, but the great big energy hog appliances like your electric forced air heating system, your electric water heater, and things like this, those are still powered from your main panel in the house. And then here's how this works when everything's normal. When we're business as usual and the power grid is up, the power flows through the transfer switch into the main panel, and from that main panel, it powers your big 240 volt loads, once again, like the electric water heater and the forced air heating system and all of that stuff. And the power flows from the main panel over to your sub panel in the house that powers the rest of the loads in your house, the critical things that you must have. And it flows through a internal transfer switch inside the inverter there and flows straight into the house and into your loads that are in your house, things like your lights and your water pump and your blender and all that good stuff. So now here's what happens when there is a blackout, when the grid goes down. We have installed what is called an inverter and some batteries. And what this is doing is this is providing us a backup power source, because batteries obviously store power. You know that. But the type of power that batteries use, that the type of power that batteries store, is not the same kind of power that you use in your house for powering most of your appliances. And so that's where the inverter comes in. The inverter takes this battery power that is pretty much unusable to you, and it converts it into regular household current and sends it into the house. It powers up, it lights up that sub panel, and it powers all of the loads that are in that sub panel. And now we're running completely off the grid, independent, just purely off of battery power. Those batteries are powering all of those loads, all of those critical loads in your house, just right there with the batteries. Bear in mind that during this point in time, you have no power to the main panel, and so those big 240 volt loads, like your forced air heating system, they are not operational right now at this point in time with the power down, with the power grid down. And so what we do, though, is if we need to power those great big 240 volt loads, we just crank up the generator. The generator power flows through the transfer switch into the main panel, and now we have power to our big 240 volt loads, if your generator is big enough. Now, some of those things in your house are gigantically large as far as power usage, and so I can't tell you whether or not your generator would be able to handle them. But if it was a great big generator, then you could theoretically power all of those things whenever the generator is running. The other thing that you might be thinking about is those batteries. They can only power your house for so long before they run out of power, right? Well, here's what happens. When our generator is running, not only is it powering those big 240 volt appliances, but that power is also flowing through into the inverter and charging your batteries up. So we run the generator for several hours and we get our batteries all nice and charged up, and now we're good to go. We can turn the generator off and we're good for perhaps another 3-4 days, something like that. If you've got a properly sized power system, then that's how it works. And so that's what happens during a blackout with this type of a system. It's a very workable system, and while it's not independent because it's relying upon the generator, it's taking a big step in the right direction because it enables you to have power 24/7 for your critical loads in the house, and you're only running the generator for, several hours every few days, something like that. So far less generator runtime, and you have power 24/7. So it's a really good option, a good stepping stone. But where we'd really like to go is to become independent, energy independent as much as possible. And so we're going to add some independent charging sources into the mix, like solar, for instance. So with a solar system, it's going to charge your battery bank up directly, and with no generator needed. So as long as your solar panels are putting off enough power to keep those batteries charged up, then you would theoretically never have to run that generator again. And then, once again, the same thing. The inverter takes that battery power, converts it into household current, and powers your critical loads. And so really, with this kind of a setup, this is where you can truly become energy independent. And so this is a nice, easy, gradual transition from on the grid to off the grid. What do you do, though, if you want to go cold turkey, off the grid? Like I said, that's the way that we did it, and you may find that it's the way that you want to go as well. I think it costs a little bit less than transitioning from on the grid to off the grid, and it's generally going to be less red tape because you shouldn't have to have any interaction with the power company, other than maybe disconnecting from the power company if you're already connected. But the way that this works is step one is a generator only, and it just powers your house, and that's it. I do not recommend starting out at this step. This is not a good option. We tried this, and it doesn't work very well because you end up burning through a ton of fuel, putting a lot of wear and tear on your generator, and you only have power when that generator is running. And so that means that you're basically living a non-electric lifestyle for most of the day. And so if at all possible, I recommend that you skip to step number 2, which is where we take a generator, we hook it up to an inverter, the power passes through that inverter into our house, powers our house directly, and it also runs down and charges up a battery bank. And this is a bank of large, deep cycle batteries. We run the generator for several hours. We get those batteries all nice and charged up, and then we do something very important. We turn the generator off. And now we've got all this battery power, but it's pretty useless to us because most of our stuff in the house uses AC household current. And so this inverter, it takes the battery power, converts it into regular household current, and powers our house. And now we've got a independent off-grid power system. I say independent, it's not sustainable though, because you're going to have to run the generator, depending upon the particulars of your case. Just on average, you're probably going to have to run the generator for several hours every few days. So definitely a big step in the right direction over a generator-only setup, but this is not ideal. This is only a stepping stone. As soon as we can, we want to add independent charging sources. For instance, a solar array hooked up to your battery bank that will charge your batteries up without using any resources whatsoever. This is where it's at. This is really what we're after. And if you want to, you can even break this step up into a couple of steps where you add a smaller amount of solar and then later on add more solar if you want to. And so this used to be more common to do when solar was a lot more expensive, but now the cost of solar is quite reasonable, and so most people end up putting their entire array up at one time. But you can do what you need to. Break this thing up into steps, and it makes it a lot more feasible. And that brings us to secret number 3. Many or most off-grid power systems are not properly designed, making them larger than needed, which costs more money, or making them smaller than required, which means that the system won't work right. If you want to end up with a workable power system for a good price, then you're going to have to be involved in this design process to some extent. And so secret number 3 is all about an accurate system design. And you want to do this before you purchase or set up your off-grid system. If you wait until after, then you've already made your mess. And I can't tell you how many people I've run into and tried to help that have done this very thing. They set up a system, don't properly design it, and then it doesn't work, and they wonder what went wrong. Well, this is what went wrong. They didn't design it properly. So there's a number of ways that you can do this, but I'm going to share with you the 5 possible approaches for getting your power system designed. We'll start with the option that I consider to be the least desirable, and we'll end up with what I think is the best option for most folks. So option number 1 is the drive-through approach. Option number 2 is the package system or sample system approach. Option number 3 is the freebie design from an off-grid retailer. Option number 4 is the pay a professional to do a thorough design approach. And so that brings us to option number 5, which is what I consider to be the best option for most people, and it's the thorough do-it-yourself system design approach. So the drive-through approach. I'll take 2 fries, 2 burgers, and 1 drink. Or should I say I'll take 4 batteries, 8 solar panels, 1 charge controller, and 1 inverter. Using the drive-through approach, you decide, or someone advises you, to buy X number of batteries and X number of solar panels and so on. And usually it's you copycatting somebody else, because somebody else did this and it's working for them, so you're going to do it. There's no scientific or mathematical method for figuring out how many you actually need. It's just based upon whatever you think you need. So this is a total shot in the dark, and it's the surest recipe you can find for off-grid disaster. Please do yourself a big favor and don't do it. Option number 2 is the package or sample system approach. And often you'll find example or sample systems available for purchase from retailers where you're given a rough idea of the lifestyle that this system supports, and then there's a list of equipment that's needed. There is a place for this sample systems, and they can be incredibly helpful, but only to help you get started with your system design. Sample systems can help give you a really rough idea of what cost you might expect to pay, and they can help point you in the right direction, but most sample systems that I've seen are very limited in detailing the lifestyle that they will support. And there's also no way to take into account your solar climate and your shade situation, which can vary quite a bit. Both of these factors can dramatically change the size and the cost of your system that you're going to need. But as already mentioned, sample systems do have their place, and they are very helpful for breaking the ice and at least starting the design process. And if you're impatient, and you're inclined toward the drive-through approach, then going with a sample system is definitely a step in the right direction. But in my opinion, the improper use of sample systems has been responsible for a lot of folks having trouble when they go off the grid. Next on our list is the freebie design from an off-grid retailer. Most off-grid retailers will do a quasi-system design for free, but with quick freebie designs, there are a number of factors that are generally not taken into account, such as shade. Often, even the climate data that is used is very generalized and not the most accurate. Also, with a freebie design, they don't have very much time to spend educating their customers on how they can cut their power usage, which means that you are very likely going to end up building a larger and more expensive system than would be needed if you were to implement some simple but important energy-saving techniques. And without accurate information on your power usage and your climate or shade, the designer is likely going to oversize your system in order to hopefully cover any inaccuracies. So all in all, the freebie design is certainly better than using the sample systems, but it's only slightly better. So then we come to the option of paying a professional for a thorough system design. There are definitely some advantages to working with an experienced professional who custom designs your system. Most, if not all, of the variables can be taken into account, such as shade, accurate climate data, and similar things. This makes for a much more accurate design that is much more likely to work well for you, but not be way oversized. Also, you're getting someone who has experience, or at least they'd better be experienced. And with experience comes the ability to problem solve and come up with unconventional solutions so that you get the most out of your system and spend only what you have to. Even though you're paying for someone to do it for you, there are certain things that you're still going to have to do for yourself. For instance, listing the appliances that you use and how much of them and how often you use and these kind of things. Only you know your habits, and the designer is going to need for you to provide this data to them. Also, unless they're local, you're going to need to collect some shade information for them, perhaps by taking some pictures or something similar. And the major downside to hiring out your system design to a professional is the cost and the difficulty of finding someone who will actually do it. It does take time to do the design. It takes time to collect all of the needed information from the client, time to educate the client about things that can save them a great deal of money. And since time is money, you can expect to pay probably in the neighborhood of $1,000, if not more, for a professional system design. If you don't have the time to learn how to do a thorough system design for yourself, then I think it's probably worth paying a professional to design it for you. The exception would be if the system will be a very small one or is used only for an emergency backup or something like that. Finally, we come to the thorough do-it-yourself system design. And this is what I think is the best option for most people. If you choose to design your own system, you'll not only be collecting your energy usage data and doing your own shade analysis, but you'll also be doing the calculations and interpreting the data to decide how many solar panels and batteries are needed and what size of inverter and charge controllers you're going to need and all that. Now this may sound like a daunting task and may seem like just an impossibility for you, but it actually doesn't have to be that difficult as long as you start out with the right know-how. And when you buy your equipment, you can always have the retailer you purchase from look over your design and look over your figures and double check you to give you valuable input. While I don't like relying on the retailer entirely, they can be a great resource of information since, they do this every day, day in and day out. So here's a quick overview of the do-it-yourself design process. The first step is to get accurate measurements of your power usage. We already talked about that earlier. Next is the daily power use calculator that I mentioned. You're going to enter your power usage, the amount of time that it's used each day, and how many days per week it's used. And the calculator does the math for you, and it yields your results. This is your average daily power usage. The next step is to do a shade analysis. The solar shade analysis helps us find out how much of the day's potential sunshine is blocked by trees or other obstructions. And unless you live on the equator, the sun is adjusting its arc throughout the sky each month of the year. And so we need to take that into account. In the winter, in the northern hemisphere, the sun will be much lower in the horizon than it will be in the summer. In the summer, the sun is way up high in the sky. And that means that there's more potential for shade issues in the wintertime. This picture illustrates how you can do a simple but accurate shade analysis using just a compass and an inclinometer. Or, even easier, you can use a smartphone or a tablet. This is one of a number of different apps that you can use to do this. It's my favorite one, Theodolite. And just basically point and click at the top of your obstructions to the south, and it will tell you your horizontal azimuth and your vertical degrees of inclination. And then once you have that information, you can just jot this out on what's called a sun chart, and voila, there you know what percentage of the sun's potential energy is lost to you each month of the year. And the upper lines, the highest blue line up there represents the arc of the sun through the sky in June. And the lowest line down there at the very bottom is December. And in between are each of the other months. Once we have our solar shade data, what do we do with all those numbers that we've collected? Well, we're going to enter that info from our shade analysis into the system design calculator that I was showing you a few minutes ago that I use for sizing systems. And after you enter your average temperatures for each month, you enter your climate data that tells you how many hours of peak sun to expect for your location, and then the calculator tells you what size of solar array that you might need to get you through the different seasons of the year. And if possible, you'd like to have a solar array that's large enough to get you through the winter. And then you're going to enter some basic info about the batteries that you're interested in, and it tells you how many batteries you need. Needless to say, this calculator is a very, very handy tool. I was so tired of having to do all this complex math every time I designed a system, and now it's just so quick and easy to do once you have all of the info collected. And, I'm going to send you the average daily power use calculator in an email. I'm just going to give that to you. But you may be wondering how to get this larger system design calculator, and I'll tell you about that in just a few minutes. But this gives you a pretty good overview of how the design process happens. And this is one of the most valuable things that you can do right now before you ever purchase any equipment or anything like that. So we've covered a lot of territory so far, and let's take a look at a quick review of the 3 most effective strategies for going off the grid for pennies on the dollar. Secret number 1 was energy efficiency, the number 1 way to dramatically cut the size and cost of your power system. And remember, you do not have to dramatically change your lifestyle. No matter what all these people out there will tell you, we are living proof of it, many others. You don't have to dramatically change your lifestyle. This is about being smart, not using brute force. Secret number 2 is the step-by-step approach, how to make cost-effective quasi-payments on your system by gradually transitioning from being on the grid to being off the grid and setting up your off-grid system one step at a time, thus breaking it up into little bite-sized chunks that are easier to afford. You might think of this as making baby steps in the right direction. And then secret number 3 was accurate system design, your 5 options for system design. And without doing a accurate system design, you're likely going to be paying too much for a system that's just bigger than you need, or you're going to be struggling with trying to make a too small system work. It's going to end up being a fiasco. And believe me, I've seen both options, both of those possibilities happen, and we want to keep you right in the middle where you've got just the right size system. Now, you might be feeling like this right now. And I know often when I'm giving classes about off-grid power systems, after about an hour or so, I start seeing eyes glazing over like this. And, I've been throwing a lot at you the last hour, but I really, really want to see you get started right now with this process of going off the grid. And I wish we had more time to work on this with you. I wish that we could spend a week with you and walk you through all of this in detail, because there's a lot more that I could do to help you save some serious money and end up with a really good power system. But since that's probably not going to fit into your schedule or mine, I've come up with something that is really the next best thing, and it might even be better in many ways. So if you don't mind, I want to tell you about a tool that I've put together for you that's going to get you all of the information that you need to go off the grid on a budget and to do it right the first time without becoming an electrical engineer and, once again, without dramatically changing your lifestyle. It's called Off-Grid Boot Camp. And for years, I've been doing classes across the nation on off-grid power systems. But there's only so much that you can share in, a 1 or 2 hour seminar. And so time and time again, I wished for an all-you-need-to-know training solution that I could refer our attendees to. And needless to say, unfortunately, I could never find anything that fit the bill. So I had to build it myself. And I spent almost an entire year putting this course together. And what emerged was the ultimate off-grid training course that covers more than I could ever hope to cover, even if you spent a week with us here at our home. And Off-Grid Bootcamp shows you how to dramatically reduce your system cost, how to choose the right solar panels and inverter and batteries and the other components of your system, how to accurately design your power system, how to use and maintain it for high efficiency, and how to end up with a power system that just plain works. I mean, that's what we're after, isn't it? It's an online course that contains 9 modules that give you all the details you need in plain English. But it's done in such a way that you can skim through the parts you don't need right now. There's no sense in plowing through material that you'll never need in your particular situation. But if you ever do need the details, we've got you covered. Module 1 covers energy efficiency. Module 2 is all about batteries. Module 3 teaches what you need to know about inverters. Module 4 focuses on generators. Module 5 covers solar panels and charge controllers. And Module 6 is all about small hydroelectric systems. Module 7 focuses on wind power, and Module 8 is all about how to design an off-grid power system from beginning to end. And Module 9 collects the frequently used lessons about using and maintaining your off-grid system. Each module contains numerous lessons, and each lesson contains 1 or more videos, and most of them also have a detailed PDF outline for future reference. One of our students named John has this to say: "I'm enjoying your off-grid bootcamp program. I've already learned a lot. The links to external sites I find to be very helpful, and I plan to collect all the outlines and put them in a binder. I think the structure of the modules makes a lot of sense and divides topics into bite-sized chunks. I just wanted to mention that your videos are all meat and no fluff. They're a treasure trove of information, and I'm learning a lot. Once again, kudos to you on the boot camp. It's a real meat and potatoes program, not a Diet Cola program." Well, thank you, John. We appreciate that. And with Off-Grid Boot Camp, you will no longer be at the mercy of someone else. You are going to be in a position to get input from retailers and to take it with a grain of salt and make your own informed decisions. Now, what if you already have some experience and you're looking for advanced training to take your knowledge to the next level? Well, I think you'll appreciate the attention to detail and the useful information that is presented in Off-Grid Bootcamp. And what if you're just getting started and you're looking for a simple, easy-to-understand explanations that aren't going to be way over your head? Well, Off-Grid Bootcamp has you in mind with the simple and easy-to-understand explanations in each lesson, and there's a minimal amount of technical jargon. You're also going to find in most of the modules there is a Bare Necessities Quick Start Guide at the beginning, which is kind of the Reader's Digest version of the module. It helps the full module to make more sense. And you might be wondering, well, what if you have a busy schedule and you just don't think you have time for a training course? Well, each module is broken into bite-sized pieces so that you can easily work on it a little bit every day. And the beautiful thing is you can take it at your own pace. There's no pressure whatsoever to do anything in any period of time. The pace is entirely set by you. Now, we've got a number of students who have enrolled so that they would have access when they need it a year or 2 in the future. Here's what another student has to say about Off-Grid Bootcamp. "I'm currently enrolled in your Off-Grid Bootcamp course. It's brilliant. Thank you. Your materials are detailed, well-evaluated, and thorough. As a novice to off-grid living, not there yet, I value your approach." Thank you, Levi. We appreciate having you as a student. And you know, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So this course is primarily video-based, with much of it filmed at our off-grid classroom. And then there's also field trips on location to actual systems when it's needed to make things clear. Now, before you enroll, I want to make sure that you understand who this course is not for. This course is not for someone who wants a tiny, ineffective, or poor quality power system that could barely power a dollhouse. You know, we live normally in our home, and we power the whole operation with our off-grid power system. And that is what you're going to learn to do in this course. This course is not going to make you an electrician and teach you how to wire a house. It's about how to design and set up an off-grid power system. Anyone who's comfortable with safely wiring a house should find it to be fairly simple to actually do the connecting of wires in an off-grid system. And don't worry if you're not familiar with wiring. Any electrician can do that part. But what isn't so straightforward is how to properly size the system and choose the best components for the job and set up those components for maximum efficiency and how to maintain them for long life. That is what you're going to learn to do in Off-Grid Boot Camp, and a whole lot more. Another student of ours named Ed has this to say: "I'm so impressed with your program, having viewed all of it since subscribing. I had read books and emails and talked to individuals, and none explained things like your videos. After your help, I'm getting ready to install an off-grid system." And I say, go, Ed. That's so encouraging every time we hear of someone taking the plunge and actually putting the knowledge that they've learned into practice. It's really exciting. So simply put, if you want to successfully go off the grid and do it right the first time, then this is a really good fit for you. As far as I'm aware, there's nothing out there like Off-Grid Boot Camp. For years, I've been searching for a complete and thorough training course that teaches the end user about off-grid power systems, and honestly, I have yet to find one that really fits the bill. The closest thing that I could find was a training course for someone who wants to become a professional solar installer. But I haven't really been comfortable sending anyone there because it focuses on the technical issues that an installer faces, rather than what the end user needs to know. Things, you know, like choosing and using and maintaining a system. And then there's the issue of cost. You can expect to pay over $5,000 for the complete course. And even if you pick out just the bare bones skeleton of online classes, you'd still be looking at roughly $2,000. And while I have little doubt that it's well worth that price for a professional installer, it's just not practical for folks like you and me who just want to go off the grid successfully and aren't interested in making a profession out of this. Plus, we've got a whole set of things as users that we need to know that an installer isn't going to be as concerned with. So in Off-Grid Boot Camp, you're going to be saving yourself some serious money. Let's take Module 1, for instance. The strategies that you'll learn in that module alone could easily save you thousands, and I mean thousands of dollars, by reducing your power usage and the overall size of your system without, now notice this, without impacting your lifestyle hardly at all. Or let's say that you're putting together a solar system. It's going to cost you at least a couple $100s, if not more, just to get a professional site analysis. And even if you're doing it on your own, you could easily spend $300 on the equipment to do it accurately. Module 5 of Off-Grid Boot Camp teaches you how to do an accurate shade analysis with minimal equipment that in most cases is going to cost you less than $5. And this is only one of the money-saving techniques that you'll learn in Module 5. So, what is Off-Grid Boot Camp going to cost? Well, you might expect to pay the $5,000 that an installer's course would cost. Or maybe you might be able to pick it up for the $2,000 that the bare bones solar installer classes would cost you. But I had to go off the grid with a limited budget, and I know what it's like. So even though Off-Grid Boot Camp would be worth every penny at that price and would still far more than pay for itself, I've cut the price down where you're going to be able to enroll for just a fraction of that. So let's total up the value of what you're getting, and then I've got a special deal for you. The first thing you're going to get is the Off-Grid Boot Camp Core Curriculum, which is regularly only $5.97. Now that's instant access to all 9 modules and the ability to both view the content online and download it. In addition, if you sign up right now, I'll throw in a huge bonus. If you enroll right away, I'll give you a free 6-month subscription to my live coaching program where you can have direct access to me for help with getting answers to your questions. You'll get email support, and you'll also get access to my private Off-Grid Bootcamp Facebook group for members only. In this group, I'll be available to give you my personal feedback and answers in case something comes up. This way, you're not going to be left to have to figure things out all on your own. In addition, I've got another bonus for you. Not only do you get the many detailed outlines that come with Off-Grid Bootcamp, but you're also going to get my ebook, Off-Grid Power Systems. This ebook will give you an excellent foundation to build on as you jump into the training modules. I'm also going to give you instant access to over a dozen previously recorded question and answer sessions that I've had with students. You know, I've been asked so many questions that you might not even think of asking. And you'll get to hear my answers to all those questions, and it's going to be a huge learning experience for you. One other thing that you might be thinking about is what equipment specifically should you get, and where's the best place to buy it? Well, you're going to get instant access to an entire presentation that I did on this very topic. It's called Off-Grid Buyer's Guide, Quality on a Budget. And I walk you through the basic equipment that I recommend with specific brands and models. And I also share where I recommend purchasing from. It's an invaluable resource when you get ready to start purchasing your equipment. So what's it going to cost? Well, let's total up the value of this, and I'm going to make you an amazing deal. So what you're going to get: Off-Grid Bootcamp, $597 value, 6-month coaching program, the Ultimate Q&A sessions, $47 value, Off-Grid Power Systems ebook, $20 value, Off-Grid Buyer's Guide class, $29 value. Altogether, we're talking a total value of $932. Now, obviously, we're not going to charge $932 for this package, although we could. But I want to ask you, if we did charge $932 and you invested that, and if all this did was to cut your power usage to 10 to 15% of the national average and save you tens of thousands of dollars in off-grid system costs, would it be worth $932 for you? And if all this did was save you from wasting thousands of dollars by purchasing the wrong off-grid equipment, would it be worth $932? And if all this did was enable you to successfully become energy independent while, notice this, living comfortably, would it be worth $932? So you can see why it's such a fantastic deal at $932. It would be a steal, but I'm going to make you an amazing offer. I'm not even going to charge the $597 that Off-Grid Bootcamp sells for by itself every day. You've taken the effort to register for this class, and that tells me that you are serious. And because you're so serious, I'm going to give you instant access to everything we've talked about today for just one single payment of $297. All you have to do is click the button to the right, and I'll give you instant access so you can get started literally within a minute or so. Now, just to put this in perspective, you could easily spend at least $200 to $300 just for a professional solar shade analysis. And that's all you'd have. We won't even get into what it would cost to have someone do a thorough system design for you. So just the solar shade analysis could pay for this entire package all on its own. And then you end up with the ability to save untold thousands of dollars in system costs, and also from avoiding the common mistakes that many newbies make. So if you're ready to start your off-grid transition the right way, and you want to have a really successful experience with it, then click the button to the right. You know, one of our students named Howard shared this comment with us. He says, "I took this off-grid boot camp, and it was very, very worth the money it cost. I can highly recommend it." And Dave says, "It was the best money I ever spent." Now, how do you know if off-grid boot camp is right for you? I'll tell you what. Test this out for a solid month. Watch or download all the videos and outlines. And at the end of 30 days, if you are not completely satisfied with what you're getting out of it, if for whatever reason you find that it just isn't for you, I'll give you a full refund, no questions asked. Just send me an email. And guess what? You get to keep everything you've downloaded as a free gift just for taking the time to give it a try. So really, you've got nothing to lose. Either you love the course and you find that it saves you tons of time and money, blood, sweat, and tears, or else you end up with a bunch of awesome training material for free. You may think that I'm sticking my neck out on this, but that's how confident I am that you're going to be completely satisfied with Off-Grid Bootcamp. If you aren't happy, I'm not happy. No harm, no foul. So if you're still trying to decide whether Off-Grid Bootcamp is right for you, I'm making it really, really easy. You don't have to figure that out today. And how would you really know without actually jumping in and testing it out? So click the button to the right and give it a shot. You'll have 30 days to decide if you want to keep it or not. And if it's not what you're looking for, just send me an email and you'll get every penny of your money back. No questions asked. Jean says, I'm amazed and impressed by the thoroughness and attention to detail that you give us in this boot camp experience. Now, how do you get started? Well, here's how it works. You just click on the button to the right, and that's going to take you to the details page where it gives you all of the details about Off-Grid Bootcamp. You're going to fill out the checkout form, and once you fill that out, you'll be taken to Off-Grid Bootcamp, given instant access, and within a few minutes, you'll receive a confirmation email that has your login information so that you can continue to log in the future. And that's how easy it is. So this is your opportunity to get off of bottom dead center and actually start your off-grid transition that you've been wanting to. Whatever your situation is right now, wherever you live, however soon you plan on going off the grid, this is your opportunity to do it right the first time, and save yourself a bundle of money, and have a really positive off-grid experience, like we have. Just click the button on the right to get started now. I'll wait around here in the chat box to make sure that we get all of your questions answered. So if any of you have questions that you've typed in and you haven't been able to get answers to them yet, please forgive us. You know, sometimes things get kind of congested in the chat box. If it's been a little while since you typed your question in, feel free to enter it again just to make sure that we see it. And I will stick around here until we get all of your questions answered. And so I just want to thank you so much for attending this class. I've really enjoyed sharing this with you. It's something that I'm really passionate about because I've seen what a difference it has made in our lives, and it has enabled us to have this degree of independence that we could not have if this was something that cost a ton of money. And so these strategies of going off the grid with a limited budget have been the only way that we were able to do this. And I'm so excited to be able to share with you the things that we've learned over the years. And so I hope it's been helpful, and feel free once again to type your questions in, and I'll try and help you here in the chat box until we get all of your questions answered. And just remember, what we've shared is highly effective. We live it. This is not theory. This is not some person, some armchair quarterback that's telling you that this can work or that this won't work. This is somebody who's doing it and who's been doing it for many years and who has helped and observed many others who are doing it successfully. So it does work. It's highly effective if you implement these strategies into your off-grid transition. So I hope it's been helpful. Thanks again for being here on the class. We look forward to assisting you in the future. And if you want to get all of the details that you need right there at your fingertips so that you can make this transition as seamless as possible, just click the button on the right and try it out. See if Off-Grid Bootcamp is for you. And either way, we just want to do whatever we can to help make this possible for you. So hope you have a good night tonight. Thanks again for being here, and we'll talk with you later. Good night.